How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Merry Christmas, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome back to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
If you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it. After all, there is a reason it has earned its reputation.
But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
So, Parker, we actually have a problem. And I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, I don't know if the audience knows this, but as you know, per our ghostly benefactor's rules, we were supposed to do 6,000 episodes this year.
Oh.
We did 24 because we missed one of the 25 that we planned. I don't know why we planned for 25 when we knew we had to do 6,000.
Yeah.
But I bring it up only because this morning I was thinking about it and I came up with a solution.
Okay.
Which is, I think it'll all work out because it is Christmas Day if we talk about a movie that embodies the magic of Christmas.
And that'll make up the difference of the other 5,976.
Yeah.
Okay.
Christmas magic has very few rules, Parker.
Sure, I can see that.
Which is interesting because the movie today that we are talking about, Klaus, 2019, doesn't actually have a lot of Christmas magic in it.
No, not well.
But it's
literal.
Yeah. But it is very much trying to kind of distance itself from a magical origin for... It's Klaus.
Sure.
We're talking about Klaus.
Yeah.
6,000 episodes. We missed, as Parker said, like over 5,000.
Yeah.
Really dropped the ball. So I just think if we talk about this movie, which coincidentally he has to send 6,000 letters, I think this might do the trick. So let's give it a go.
Why not?
And if we don't, then next year you'll have to see what happens.
Yes.
Parker, what's your history with Klaus?
I discovered Klaus the year after it had come out. I didn't catch it in the 2019 season, I don't believe. But I did catch it the year after. Was just looking for holiday movies to watch, had seen people kind of talking about it, especially from like an animation standpoint, which is kind of a sphere that I find myself in often.
Right.
And I don't know why I didn't get to it the year that it came out. I think it just, it was a busy year, 2019. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't quite get to it. But 2020 was just looking for good holiday movies to check out in the season. And my partner at the time and I watched it and we're like, oh, hey, this is really lovely. And it was really funny because we were watching it and the fire alarm went off at my apartment halfway through. So everybody evacuated the building and I took Toby out and we're like, well, I don't know when we're getting let back in, but the movie's really good. And so we just pulled up the movie on my phone and like huddled in the car and watched like 20 minutes of the movie until we got let back in. So that was my first experience with Klaus. And it has become absolutely a part of my Christmas canon every single year.
Nice.
It's like this, Muppet Christmas Carol, and Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown, or Charlie Brown Christmas are like the must-watches of the season for me now. It's just, I don't know, it's really, really lovely. What about you? What is your experience with this film?
Similarly, I didn't get to this until a year later after it had come out. I remember vaguely it being at the Oscars because it was nominated for Best Animated Feature, but I didn't see it until the next Christmas when my mom and I was at my parents' house and my mom and I were sitting there and we were trying to find something to watch. And I found Klaus and I'd heard about it and I was like, let's just watch this. And so we watched Klaus and we both really liked it. And then I watched it again the next year, I believe at your house. And then I think the year after that I watched it again at your...
Probably.
No, actually, I don't think I was there last year and then I watched it this morning. So I've only seen it the 3 times.
Okay.
I missed it last year. But I do agree. I do think it is worthy of being in the Christmas canon for people. It's just, I don't know if it necessarily has reached that status.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, actually, I do. I have lots of theories why, which we'll get into. But
this is also our first Christmas movie.
Yes.
This episode is going out on Christmas Day. Also, if you don't celebrate Christmas, that's fine because we're not here to celebrate it. I should have thought of that. But yeah, I think it is an interesting question of Christmas movies.
Yeah.
And what are they trying to do
Right.
I mean, no, this isn't our first Christmas. We literally talked about Love Actually last week.
I wasn't going to interject on you, but yeah, we did.
Literally talked about Love Actually.
I thought you meant like this was coming out on Christmas. Like if you're listening to it, if you're listening to this as it comes out, it is Christmas Day.
That is true. But I will say, I forgot about Love Actually being a Christmas movie, which is wild. But I think we were so caught up in discussing that movie and what it was trying to do.
Sure.
As far as like love, that we didn't really talk about the merits of what it takes to be a good Christmas movie.
Sure.
What do you think a good Christmas movie should look like? And then we can get into Klaus and how you feel that it matches up with that.
I think
it's kind of a different criteria.
Yeah, the qualities of a good Christmas movie. And it's so funny because, you know, it's the meme at this point, but it's still accurate of like, we live in a society, you have to exist within the society, get over it. In the sense that all of these films are to one extent or another a product of like a capitalist system, but something integral to me about like Christmas movies is like a very anti-consumer, anti-capitalist message. It's very much like ingrained in there. And so that's a big part of it for me is like, you know, you can find like the joys of gift giving can be a focus, but it's not about the gifts. It's about, you know, finding something thoughtful for somebody,
right?
And like showing up in that way. That's a big part of like a good Christmas movie for me.
Or just like the meaning of receiving a gift.
Totally.
Generally, it's not like about how much like there's a lot of Christmas stories that are just like, it doesn't matter how much you spend. Yeah. What matters is how much you care.
And I think that's important. I think that's an important piece of it. Yeah. I think engaging with either childlike wonder or childlike innocence is important. It doesn't have to be focused entirely around like, these children believe in Santa Claus. It just has to have kind of a purity to it, I suppose. Okay. A kind of a feeling of, hey, we're going to put aside adult cynicism in favor of, wouldn't it be better if we all cared a little bit more and if we all approached each other the way children approach each other and tried to just be as fully integrated as possible, which I think Klaus does a great job of. Yeah. So that's another big piece for me. And then, yeah, just kind of like usually a juxtaposition. This is going to sound so strange because Christmas is so, as a idea, as an icon, as a holiday, it's so much about like spreading joy and cheer and happiness. But Christmas is, you know, usually it's within a week or less of like, you know, the winter solstice. It is the longest, darkest day of the year. And I think that's an important underbelly for me with like Christmas movies that I love, is that it grapples with kind of the depression and dourness of the season that can exist in the dead of winter, where it's just like, man, I haven't seen the sun in so long. Right. And everything is cold and dark and it can be a lot. And like, that's, you know, it's what I love about the pairing of taking Charlie Brown and the Peanuts gang and, you know, marrying them to Christmas, is that Charlie Brown as a character is just walking embodiment of depression. And it's like, okay, how does this character deal with the idea of Christmas? And he's constantly trying to find the meaning of it because he doesn't like the commercialism. He doesn't like the flashiness. He can't find the same meaning that everybody else can in it and has to find his own kind of meaning, which is really lovely. Same thing with It's a Wonderful Life, like surprisingly a very dark and depressing movie with a very hopeful underbelly.
Right. Well, and I mean, A Christmas Carol kind of invented the modern Christmas story in a lot of ways. Primarily, I think it just donated a lot of like, Christmas is fundamentally the worst time of the year. Like, it is cold and dark and sad, and it's awful. But also a huge part of why I think the holidays are important generally, not just Christmas, but like there's a bunch of holidays, obviously, like Hanukkah and New Year's and, you know, Kwanzaa as well. Like, they're all kind of based around getting together with people and bracing together, embracing each other at the worst time of the year. And we made a little short film that's kind of about that once upon a time. We did. But I think, that's totally correct. Is like, if you like, it's a miserable time and it's really sad. And I think a good Christmas story grapples with how awful it can be. But then it's also like, okay, but the point of the holiday season is that you're inside and it's warm and you have people.
Yeah.
And I think it's fundamentally about people and love
I agree.
and warmth.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Any other aspects that make a good Christmas
No, I
movie
think you
for
got it.
All right.
I also love a good ghost at Christmas time, which
Yeah.
we don't get enough of. And yet, Klaus.
We'll talk off mic because I've got some thoughts about that.
Oh,
Yeah,
very
some
exciting.
new things have come up for me that I've been thinking about.
I
Anyway,
should just do
yeah. So Klaus.
Klaus. Quick summary, really quick.
Mm-hmm.
If you've seen an Emperor's New Groove, it's basically that.
Pretty much.
But I don't want to fault this movie for. I'm not trying to like cheapen it.
No,
I'm
but just
saying
like,
that,
as a touch point for
as a
people.
touch point for people, it is basically that. There is a really snobby, stuck-up little guy played by Jason Schwartzman named Jesper, who is the son of the like Postmaster General in like the 17th century kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And he's terrible. He hasn't been doing any of the training that his father has demanded he do.
He's trying to flunk out.
He's trying to flunk out because he doesn't want to do this. He wants to just go back to his cushy lifestyle. And his father's basically like, no, I'm going to punish you. You're going to learn to work. I'm sending you to Smirensburg, which apparently was a real town that the director thought was a place in Norway. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. But it was a real town. And it was like famous as like a whaling port.
Very cool. There's a lot of whale stuff in this.
There's whale stuff in this. It was great.
Did you handle that okay?
Yeah, I'm afraid of whales. But I do find it's just if I see a picture of a real person next to a whale.
I know.
Parker's trying to derail the podcast. Anyway, so Jesper goes to Smirensburg, and it's a town split in two. There are two warring factions, two families who have been warring for centuries, and there's good gags about that throughout the movie.
It's very much inspired by like the two main like warring American families of like American folklore. The names are slipping my mind right now. But there is like a very a very storied like grudge between two families.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think a lot of this is drawing on.
Right. So he goes there and he has to send 6,000 letters, coincidentally very similar to our situation. And he doesn't really know how to do that. He's terrible at his job, but he quickly learns by kind of a coincidence that basically a kid draws a picture of himself imprisoned in the house that he lives in. He feels terrible. He feels sad. It drops down to Jesper. Jesper tries to get him to pay for it to be postage. He doesn't. And then that letter he tries to go to every single house trying to see if anyone wants to send letters. He learns of a woodsman who lives up in the woods. Did you find the thing about the families?
I did, yes.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
The Hatfields and McCoys, two American Appalachian mountaineer families who, with their kinfolk and neighbors, engaged in a legendary feud that attracted nationwide attention in the 1880s and 90s and prompted judicial and police actions, one of which drew an appeal up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Whoa.
So it's kind of riffing off of the Hatfields and McCoys a little bit.
Oh, that's fun. So he goes up to the woodsman's cabin. He gets real spooked. There's a room full of old toys, I should say. And he leaves the letter with the kid's drawing behind. Yeah. And basically the woodsman, whose name is Klaus, played by J.K. Simmons. Nice. He brings a toy for the kid. And Jesper gets kind of wrangled up in that. And then it kind of goes from there. Word spreads from all the kids that if you write a letter to Mr. Klaus, he will bring you a toy. And then we get a really fun throughout the story as Jesper and Klaus kind of work together to do this. Jesper also kind of meets a teacher, Alva.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Alva?
Played by Rashida Jones. And kind of like gets to know her, and they're clearly kind of like falling in love. And basically through this, we do get really fun sequences that kind of establish a lot of the Santa Claus mythology. Flying sleigh, reindeer, lump of coal, and it's all just kind of like circumstantial and just kind of happens. It's not like it's really part of anything. It's just like things that Jesper chooses to do, things that happen to them as they go about their business. I mean, I don't know. Do we need to do like a beat by beat for this?
I don't know necessarily. I think we can kind of pull the moments that we find interesting, but like, that's the basic premise, and then
families try to stop them because all the kids are starting to hang out together, and then all the adults start to hang out together, and they're all having a wonderful time. Yeah. These two warring families. So they try to stop them, doesn't work. And we'll get into that whole plot kind of thing, because I think that's kind of our biggest hang up with the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the end, it's really nice. And Klaus kind of passes on and then
becomes Santa.
And Jesper's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible, but he's doing it. And I get to see him once a year. And it's just really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the animation's really great.
Animation is really
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
What's kind of the first thing that you want to touch on?
So this movie is ostensibly like trying to be an origin story for Santa Claus, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of movies that have tried to do similar things, and more often than not, they come across, very clumsily.
Yeah.
Very like, it feels like you're making a prequel to culture, you know? Like it has all the problems like,
Right.
whoa, look at this thing, but it's like
Yeah.
with iconography rather than with IP or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And this feels so organic and it feels so earned. And like, there's a montage after, you know, the first set of deliveries that have happened because Klaus is like, okay, we're going to do more of this.
Yeah.
And Jesper is hesitant at first, but then realizes, oh, hey, cha-ching, I can get all of these letters this way, right? And so there's this montage of them going through in the night and like delivering a bunch of toys, and the next morning him hearing the kids talking about it, and you start getting all the pieces where it's like he can fit down any chimney, and it just shows Jesper like, you know, squashed into a little stove somewhere because he's a very skinny guy, and Klaus is huge. He's the burly woodsman.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh yeah, no, he can get into any chimney, and you know the coal stuff all is very organic. Where there's a kid who is bullying Jesper and he doesn't like, and when he realizes he's at that kid's house, he leaves coal instead of the toy. And when he gets mad at him, he pulls out Klaus can see you. He knows when you've been naughty or nice.
Yeah.
And it's a really great scene, but like they lay out all of those pieces in very clever ways where it's like, okay, here's the red suit, here's the elves, here's the reindeer, here's the coal. And it never feels pandering. It never feels like, hey, look at this thing.
Right.
Because it usually happens and then like 2 seconds afterwards, like, oh, it's that piece of the mythology, which I think is really nice.
Yeah. I do want to read a quote from one of the directors, Sergio Pablo, who said, well, it was part of the reason that he wanted to do this was like, he had this idea of like, what if everything that's good about Santa Claus came about through the actions of the most reprehensible character you can imagine, which is a fun idea. But then he said, in the beginning, it was mostly me doing the seeking for that story, but I thought that there was something interesting in the fact that there was no canon, no widely accepted origin story for Santa Claus. Depending on who you ask, you're going to get the historical answer or the religious answer or one of the many traditions from every different country. I thought if I could find the honest, non-controversial version of that story, it would be interesting. And then when I landed upon this idea of making Klaus a more human character with a past and pairing him up with a very selfish postman, I realized that the relationship could really carry an interesting story, which I think is a good point. Yeah. And I do think it is like an interesting idea because you do mention like, I mean, there's a stop motion one where it's like a Santa Claus origin story. There's one from a few years ago called A Boy Called Christmas, and that's him as well. It's got like some big names in it, but again, I feel like a lot of them are very regionally specific, or they're a little too like kitschy with it. They're a little too like, and then he, you know, and this just feels very natural, and it feels very organic, and it's not. And I think it helps that they aren't doing things one-to-one of any different country. It is very much like, here's how it may have started, and it has since evolved into what we know it to be. Yeah. Right? Which I do think is a really good way of approaching this. Because a lot of other origin stories might just be like, we're going to do an origin of how the man became magical, and how does he do all of this, you know? And then the Santa Claus is like, it's a contract, and you're like, least interesting way. Yeah. It's fun, but whatever, you know?
Totally. No, I completely agree. And I think that like that's what works in its favor is that it takes broad concepts culturally and doesn't nail them down to one particular interpretation. It's just sort of like, hey, here is an idea, and it's going to have Slavic influences and European influences and all of these other elements.
A lot of Scandinavia. Yeah.
But it's not locked down in any one particular area. I also think it's very fun that a big part of like what we know of the kind of 20th century interpretation of Santa Claus in America is very much fueled by like the letter writing campaign of You Write Letters to Santa Claus, which was a big part of like the US Post Office. So I love that like postal service is a big piece of this origin story for him.
I mean, that's how it opens. It opens with Jesper saying, like, you may have written a letter to a man in a big red suit before, but have you ever wondered why?
Yeah.
Like, how did this story start? This is a story about letters. That's how it opens.
Yeah, and I just like that element a lot.
Yeah, me too. It does make me like letters. Like, it reminds me that I think letters are super cool.
Letters are
And
great.
it's awesome. And
love some
please don't
letters.
defund the postal service. We did a little thumbs up with the camera for those of you not watching. Yeah, I mean, what do you think of the family stuff? What do you think of the family feud stuff? Do you think it works?
I think it's fun. I think it's a good externalizing of like an internal conflict of it's like, okay, if the theme of what Santa is going to represent is unity and harmony and loving each other and gift giving and all these things, a very easy shorthand for the antithesis of that is, okay, battle and feuds and anger. And this is a really good comical way of introducing those ideas without making it too heavy.
Right.
It's not like Santa's enemy is the nuclear bomb. Like, it's like, you know,
I mean, Parker, that sounds awesome.
that could go hard. My favorite scene in this movie is when Cillian Murphy shows up at the end to do battle with J.K. Simmons' Santa Claus.
Oh, man. Wow. Love that.
But you know what I mean? Like, it could very easily get blown out of proportion in context of like the tone it's going for.
Yeah, they could have taken it too big, too wide of just being like, all of humanity is war.
Right. And you could have had like, I don't know, a Jack Frost type in there as the antagonist,
Sure.
like having a specific person like, no, not the spirit of Christmas, like being very against that.
I'm against toys.
Yeah, and I like that this is, we have our own thing going on and we hate each other, and you happen to be like interfering with that, which I like that
And
it's
not
a step
intentionally.
removed. Yeah.
It's not the intention of Klaus. I mean, obviously Jesper's intention is to get off the island for a lot of it. But like, it's not Klaus's intention of like, I'm sick of these people fighting.
Yeah.
We have to give them toys, you know? It's not that. It's just, we're doing a nice thing. And the whole theme of the movie is one good selfless deed sparks another, right?
Right.
It's repeated a lot, and it's true.
Yeah.
And it's a nice Christmassy thing.
Exactly.
You know, I think that's a good thing to center it around.
So in that regard, I think the family feud works for me.
Yeah, I think so,
I
too.
think it's a good shorthand.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of the love story?
It's cute.
I think it's cute.
I think it's not the focus, and that's okay. I don't think it needs to be the focus.
No.
It feels maybe a touch undercooked for that reason, but again, it's not that kind of movie, so it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't really bother me. It's nice that it's there. It doesn't need to be anything any more than it is.
It's nice to have like a more personal connection to someone who is directly being influenced or impacted by the changes that are happening on the island.
Totally.
I think in that way it functions really well.
Right. And she stands in very well as an illustration of that main point you were talking about, is that like, as she's observing what Jesper is doing, even if his reasons are selfish, which we're going to get into, like, she observes that, and then that instigates within her, these kids need me, and I should probably dip into my savings of trying to get out of this place to teach them how to read and write.
Right. Well, and also, she's also a good inclusion because the families there have been there forever and hated forever, but she arrived on the island optimistically and was soured by the island and has been, you know, and in that way, I do think that is a little undercooked in that way of like, I mean, we don't need her to like monologue about how it's changed her opinion.
Sure.
It's visually conveyed very well. And like, obviously it works. But that is like something where I'm like, yeah, that like, it would also have been like nice to know a little bit more about like, oh, well, what are you thinking about all this? But yeah, I do think it's like a nice inclusion. I'm not against it.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Yeah. Okay. So
we touched on this with the Puss in Boots episode, especially.
I love this movie
Yes.
so much. This is like a 4.5 star.
Yeah.
So close to a 5. Like, just it works so many levels, which we're going to get into a little bit more. But like, the one thing that we both mutually catch on, and like you said, we talked about in the Puss in Boots, I am always frustrated by narratives, and it shows up in all narratives, but especially in like animated films geared towards children. It seems to show up a lot.
It's a really nice way to convey a message of understanding your friends.
Totally.
And communicating. but not really. And also, it's a good thing to include if you don't have an antagonist.
Right. And so this trope that shows up a lot is a forced misunderstanding, a secret that is being kept from somebody.
A lie that has been told that has since become not the case.
Yeah.
Usually it's like a character started out.
Yeah. There's
being
always
terrible.
that line. It's like, well, maybe it started out that way, but it's not that way
But
anymore.
now it's different.
Yeah.
And it's like, it happens a lot.
It happens a lot.
And it happens in Klaus.
And they find out that he's been doing all of these, he's been telling the children to write letters so that he can get out of town. And he hasn't told anybody that. And Klaus and Alva and everybody else are very incensed by this and are very upset. And like, wow, there's always an angle, right? Because he has that conversation earlier on where he's talking to Klaus. He's like, well, what is in this for you? Like, what's your angle here? He's like, I don't have an angle. Like, I like spreading joy to children and I like making toys.
Yeah.
And he asks Jesper what his angle is, and he gets interrupted. He doesn't get an answer. And so that's the whole thing. Is like, oh, okay, you were just conning all of us for your own selfish reasons this whole time, yada, yada, blah, blah. He's had a full change of heart at this point, like a palpable, visual, tangible change of heart for probably the last like 20 minutes of the movie before this.
Yeah,
like, this
he's
is not a
clearly
new
very
thing.
invested and enjoying it.
Yeah.
And then his father comes to collect him because the families have made a temporary truce to write 1 billion letters, sent them, and then notified his father that he achieved the goal before the end of the year.
Kick him out of town, basically.
Kick him out of town, basically. So his dad comes to collect. He goes with him. And basically they get to the dock, and then we don't see it because they did want to do a little reveal. But he tells his father everything and decides to stay. And then, what's her? Margu, the little Sami girl, comes back, and he talks to her for a bit. And is like, yeah, of course I'm not going to leave. And then he goes back and he helps like kind of foil the plan, but also not really foil the plan because it was already foiled by Klaus and Alva and the Sami people. Yeah.
Which I like,
it's just very short.
That is one small turn in this that I do like. I like the fact that like him saving the day has more to do with him proving himself than saving the day. Like, I like the fact that everybody else isn't just helpless. It's like, yeah, no, they're smart enough to do something. Yeah, we did it already.
Yeah, you just made it complicated. And then he kind of says, he says like, what? So all this was all for nothing? Because there's an extended chase sequence down a mountain.
Yeah, where Klaus is giving him a silent treatment.
Yeah, and it is very fun. But it's also like, just, all right. He clearly is into it. Like, he's clearly invested. He's not doing that anymore. And I always find it
Well, it's one of those things of like, I
don't believe them.
I get why it's here. You want to introduce conflict, you want to introduce a turn, but the issue is they already did that and they do it better.
Yeah.
Like 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like a double beat almost.
Yeah,
because what happens instead is that earlier in the movie, they are running out of toys. He's made all these toys in the past, and they're giving them away, and Klaus is like, well, maybe only 1 or 2 more trips, and then we're out of toys. And Jesper freaks out, and he's like, no, we need more letters. And so rather than being honest with him and telling him what's going on, he tries to convince Klaus. He's like, hey, make more toys. He's like, I don't make toys anymore. And he does this whole presentation, is very pushy, and Klaus is very visibly uncomfortable. And he's in his workshop showing him all these, like, oh, you can, over here's your woodworking station. Over here, you can work with all the gears and the cogs. And he pulls the sheet off something, and Klaus is like, no, stop. And he pulls it down. And it's this really beautiful, like, carving of essentially like a family tree with a figure of Klaus and his wife and all these empty spots.
Yeah.
Where children should be and they're not.
Yeah.
And Klaus gets very upset. He says, get out. He yells at him. And there's this big rift in their relationship. And Jesper's like, oh, I went too far.
Yeah.
I pushed too hard. He takes some of the woodworking tools with him and tries to make a toy for the little Sami girl. And he's horrible at making toys. And he falls asleep at the workbench. Klaus comes to find him and starts working on it, and Jesper wakes up and he tries to have a conversation with the Klaus. Just nope. And just points at the woodworking, and they just work in silence. Yeah. And then they make the sled for the girl, and they kind of repair their relationship over that. And it's a very nice moment. It is a very organic way of introducing conflict between the two of them, putting a rift there, and it works really well. And so it feels weird to have 20 minutes later do the same thing over a misunderstanding, because this was here over a very organic, like, real reason to be upset.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because obviously they've introduced this whole, it was built on a lie thing, and we have seen Jesper change his motivations over the course of the film, but I don't think it would be satisfying if he just never talked about it. to
Sure.
anyone, but you could still have like his father come and then just have him be like, no, actually, I'm done. We're going to do this. I'm not coming with you.
Yeah.
You can still do the chase with the families because they still want to wreck all the toys because Jesper comes back and the chase still happens like he never left.
Yeah.
So we don't need that.
Right.
We already did the rift. The rift's been solved. At this point, all we need is him standing up to his dad, his dad being like, well, you've done a great job. Come back. And he's like, no. And that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
And his father can go, okay, I'm proud of you.
Totally. Like,
Right?
yeah,
Like, we
the
don't-
resolution to the lie is fine.
Yeah.
It just doesn't need to be as drawn out.
And it doesn't
as
make
is.
sense to me that Jesper at that time would go with him.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fine. Whatever. It's fine. Whatever.
Again, it is a half-star nitpick
Yeah.
that I've got with this movie.
So I have one other thing that I think needs to be mentioned that I did read about a little bit. I tried to find some more like direct sources. I just found like a paper that someone had written, but they didn't talk directly to it. But I do think the inclusion of the Sami people is interesting because earlier this year when I went to Seattle, I did go to the Nordic Museum and I learned a lot more about the Sami people. And they were basically also the indigenous people of Scandinavia who were pushed out by a lot of people who came there. And the inclusion of them here, I think, is obviously well done. Sergio Pablo, one of the directors, did mention like he initially was writing it where Margot would be speaking English, and then he went, no, she should be Sami. She should be speaking Sami. They found a Sami actress to come play her.
Very cool.
Which is very cool. But I do think it runs into a similar problem that particularly adaptations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory run into. And I don't want to get, but my point is just, it's hard to make an entire like group of people into a workforce. And this movie touches on it very gently. They come to help voluntarily and they do come to help. But the idea that they are Santa's elves feels a little off to me. And I was looking into it. I couldn't find any like general opinions from Sami people about this, how they felt about it. It is interesting. This did come out the same time as Frozen 2 in the same year, and Frozen 2 also has Sami influence. So it's like suddenly it's like Sami people.
Sure.
And I do want to give props to this movie for doing the language, fully committing to that.
Yeah.
Fully committing to portrayals of their traditional outfits, all those sorts of things. And I don't think it's really an issue. Like clearly the people come to help. And they say like a good deed sparks a good deed. Like they've come to help because they like what we're doing. But I do think it's just something I wanted to mention and make mention of, that it is kind of, and I don't know. It's not necessarily like, I don't want to say it's problematic of the movie. I think it's done better than a lot of other movies would do it.
But it's worth noting.
I think it's worth noting of kind of this, I don't know, kind of this like playing them if like, and again, it's not really like the movie is saying there's some sort of magical monolith that come and help this man. Yeah. This white man, because Santa is, Klaus isn't Sami.
Right.
But I do think it's a nice inclusion.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like, I am glad that they're here.
Yes.
With the caveat that, like you're saying, I can totally see everything you're talking about of like potentially it being an issue. I think the movie does a good job of not steering it that direction.
I agree.
Though, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things of like, this isn't entirely one-to-one, but go with me here of like...
I mean, I mentioned Wonka.
Well, I mean, I just remember like you and I both kind of tensing up when we were watching Fast Times, that there were certain elements that showed up in that movie. We're like, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
And then like it resolved itself in a way that we're like, okay, no, this feels okay. This feels like it's good. It's good that it's here. But just like the presence of certain ideas when you're not sure what direction they can be heading can be reason to pause, I suppose. And this could maybe fall in that category, but I think where it lands is overall fairly positive. Again, the fact that she is speaking Sami, she's not speaking English.
Yeah.
I like the fact that she's not subtitled. I like the fact that like there is an active interpretation that has to happen. Like he has to go to Alma. He's like, do you understand? He's like, do you understand what she's saying? Like, can you help me with this?
Yeah.
And I like that element of it rather than just, oh, okay, here are like, if the whole movie was just, okay, Margot and her people are like the stand-ins for the way that people interact with like droids in Star Wars. It's like, we don't understand what they're saying, but everybody else is like, oh yeah, no, exactly. And I like the fact that they're like the language barrier exists. And the one time that they do that is played for comedy of Jesper talking to himself completely. And Margot just being like, what are you saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily like a problem with it, but in case people do have kind of, I
Sure.
want to hold space for that.
No, I'm glad you did,
but
really.
but yeah, for me, I think it mostly avoids anything that feels like, ooh, you know, that kind of like nervousness that you get.
Totally.
But yeah, I just wanted to like hold space for that.
No, I appreciate that.
But yeah, I mean, it's just really nice. There's some pop music in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. I did like, I was reading an interview with the director about the little rap that plays after Jesper introduces the coal myth to the kids. And it's like, that's what happens when you mess with the postman.
Yeah.
And they were going to get like a real rap track and get the rights to it and use it. But they were like, it was too much. And then his editors kind of threw that in as a joke. And then audiences reacted to it and they went, all right, we're just going to use it. And it is pretty funny. It's really good.
That's what happens when you mess with the postman.
Yeah.
It's really great.
It's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the ending's really nice.
Yep. There are
We should talk about the wife,
Yes.
Lydia.
Yeah. So it's interesting because this also is very tropey in a lot of ways, but it works somehow here in a big way, which is the trope of magical dead wife.
Yes.
Of like, okay, here I am this gaping hole in your life, but somehow, some way I will be pressing you onwards towards what you need.
Right. Even though I have died, my sole purpose is to guide you.
Yeah.
But it works. It's cute.
I don't know. It's really nice here. It's, Klaus is mourning the loss of his wife, and she is kind of personified through the wind and the leaves, and they do a really lovely little bit of like effects animation with like the wind picking up bits of snow and the leaves, and like you can see it
and
swirl.
the letter, the original letter, which kicks everything off.
Right.
It's very clear that she sees some sort of opportunity for him to find purpose and love again in his life, and is like clearly guiding him to that. We never see her.
No.
We never see like some sort of like apparition of her. It's just the wind. It does circle around Jesper a lot.
Yeah.
To the point that when I first watched this movie, I was kind of like, is he like his wife reincarnated? Like I was like, what is, but it's really just love.
He's just opening himself up to people again.
Right. It's just like, come on.
Yeah, like you don't have to live isolated up in the woods making birdhouses for me.
You can have
like,
friends. You can love again. And so I guess in some ways, love actually is.
We're back, baby.
People. It's just people. It's being with people and working with people on something that you care about.
And her inclusion is sort of the first of two very like minor drops of like supernaturalism in the film, right? Is like, okay, clearly his wife's spirit is around and is influencing events to a certain extent, but it's very like, it's very soft magic system. It's very, the rules are all over the place and doesn't really matter. It's just as a catalyst and as an emotional like center point, right?
Right.
Which then leads nicely into the end of the film where years and years have passed and Klaus is out in the woods working as he always is. And the wind
12 years.
12 years after the events of the rest of the story. And he's off in the woods making birdhouses and chopping wood like he usually is. And the wind sort of beckons him. And he's like, okay, it's time. He's like, I'm coming, my love.
Yeah.
And he follows the wind and he walks past a tree. And when the camera moves past the tree, he's just gone.
Yeah.
And, Jesper has some narration. He's like, I looked everywhere. I asked everyone. Like, he just disappeared. Like, nobody knew it. Like, it's not like we found him in the woods somewhere. He just was gone.
Yeah.
And then he's like, and then something happened I can't explain. He's like, I've been trying to riddle out for years. Gave up trying to figure it out a long time ago. Like, all I know is that once a year I get to see my friend.
Yeah.
And it's this really lovely, like, again, just the sprinkling of some Christmas magic. It's like, he transcended into being immortal Santa Claus, and he does this once a year now. And like, it's just very
and the
lovely.
Sleigh bells come over the roof, and that's how Jesper knows that he's coming. And yeah, it's a really interesting way of introducing the magical element of it.
Which it seems like a very, I don't know, a very bold take in a film which is very much geared towards being family friendly and kind of not geared exclusively towards children, but open to children in a lot of ways. That normally it feels like you'd be introducing that magic like super early on, right? But it isn't any of that. Like, you get some of the energy with his wife, And then that just happens at the end of the movie. There is no other, like, the reindeer don't actually fly.
Yeah.
They jumped off a cliff and flew past somebody's window.
Yeah.
Like, there is no moment of like, whoa, we found the magical fairy dust and now, whoa, look at this. Like, it just happens.
Yeah.
And I think that so much of what works for me about this and what works for me about like good Christmas narratives is that we've unfortunately gotten to a point in like our media landscape where it feels like we feel the need to over-explain everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Marvelization of like, okay, what's the power scaling? Like, what are the rules of this? How does this all work?
Yeah.
What's the shield made out of? How does Doctor Strange's magic work?
But also kind of a result of like what happened with the Star Wars fandom as well, with the expanded universe, where they just went, we're going to explain every single detail.
Totally.
And then now people expect that all the time.
Yeah, and so because of that, like, you know, sometimes having hard explanations for your magic works really well. I think Avatar: The Last Airbender is a really good example of like, here are the rules of bending, and there's still some mysticism to it. There's still some like, you know, scaling and some variations, but like here are generally.
Right.
And I just think that I much prefer seeing magic in narratives, and especially Christmas narratives, that is very mysterious and very unexplained. Like, Scrooge didn't break some talisman that now he's getting cursed by ghosts with. Like, they just show up because they show
he got
up.
like a cursed golden coin or something.
Right, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
greedy to give it
they're
back.
ghosts.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
They just exist. They come to visit you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this feels very much of the same vein. It's like, yeah, he became Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just happened.
Because we don't need to explain that.
Yeah.
And also just the less you try to explain how Santa works to kids, the easier.
Totally.
And even in this movie at one point, they're like, and the operation kept expanding, more towns in our kind of area. And I'm like, how'd you do that? Like, how are you doing that? Because it shows them on a boat. And I'm like, so it's not all in one night, obviously. We know that. But like, you just kept going. I was like, that's cool. Taking boats. That's slow. Anyway, you don't need to explain all that. Just let him be the wind, you know?
Yeah.
Let Santa Claus be the winter wind.
Perfect.
Great.
Great.
Any other? Oh, we should talk about the animation. It draws a lot from 2D animation.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of like 3D CGI, that sort of thing. But it all works really well.
As I understand it, and I may be wrong. I watched like a documentary featurette. I should have watched it closer to when we were recording. But as I recall, a lot of it is that it was done in 2D first. Then they brought 3D models in that are basically the shapes of the characters underneath that to get the lighting the way that they want.
Yeah, he talked a lot about lighting, and how that was something. He worked as a Disney animator in the 90s on things like Hunchback and Tarzan. And I will say, this has kind of that Disney Renaissance sauce in it.
Totally.
To the way the characters move. And it makes me ache for the timeline where this is what Disney is doing now.
Oh, man.
Because it has a very nice quality to it.
It's gorgeous to look at.
That is gorgeous to look at and has more of that kind of classic, kind of like quote unquote Disney vibe that Disney has lacked for 20 years.
Well, it's been really great, like with it being the season. I've seen a couple of animators who worked on the film posting on like Twitter like pencil tests that they did, and it's just magical to look at. It's just like, wow.
Yeah. And I also feel like this feels like a natural progression of where things like Atlantis and Treasure Planet were going. But we just went in a different direction.
Yeah.
And that kind of breaks my heart.
It does.
But I'm so glad that Klaus exists for that reason.
Me too.
I do have one or two more quotes from Sergio, who talked about, he said, I thought it was time to not just make a nostalgic 2D looking film, but to try to push the medium forward as much as we could. And this would have had started production before Spider-Verse came out.
Yeah.
But there's kind of this like push in like the late 2010s of just like, we're tired. Let's do something different, you know? I think that's really nice.
I agree.
And then kind of taking it back to Christmas as well. He talks about as he realized that what he was thinking, his ideas, he was like, oh, I'm making a Christmas movie. And he went, there's a gold standard for Christmas films, and you've got to try to become part of that small list in the rotation every year. It's a very select group, and it has great films in it, and how do we make ourselves different? And so that's why I kind of wanted to bring up those questions at the start, is like, for you, this has entered the Christmas canon.
Totally.
And so I think, unless you have more things to say about Klaus, we can get into the criteria.
No, I think that was about it.
Okay, great. And also touch on, clearly this movie was trying to. Let's start with like what it's trying to do and how well it's trying to.
Yeah.
Because he talked a lot about they were trying to push 2D to a new place and do 2D animation in a way that feels nostalgic but also feels new and fresh. And I think they nailed that.
Totally.
Absolutely. They're also trying to create a story that kind of can be like a widely accepted origin of Santa Claus. And I feel like they did really well at that. And he also talked about, I don't know the exact quote, but he talked a lot about like trying to not do the magic thing. He wanted this to be like a very secular explanation of like, here's how this may have happened and how this may work until the end when you need to kind of be like, oh, and now he still does it. I don't know. Like, what do you think about how well it's trying to do what it's trying to do?
I don't know. Based off of all those goals that he's talking about, I think they nail it.
Yeah.
I think it is a really great grounded take on the material that still has so much whimsy and magic to it without being magical.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, great. Well, would you say it's doing better at what it's trying to do than Citizen Kane?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think pretty firmly, I'd say.
Okay, great. I agree.
Yeah.
All right.
Technical and historical significance.
I think this is part of this kind of revolution in animation that we're seeing. I don't know if this plays a part as much as like as far as technical and historical influence.
Not quite. I think it had the potential to. I think part of it is that it's not as flashy in its techniques as Spider-Verse was.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying that like Spider-Verse is in your face because it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but I think people took more notice of that because it was so direct. Whereas this you could mistake for like if you are familiar with 2D animation, you'll pick it up. Like that's what I noticed the first time I watched it. Like, oh, there's a lot of 2D animation going into this, and it makes me very happy to see. But like if you're unfamiliar with that, some people could mistake this for just a fully CG film.
Right, almost like the Peanuts movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like this is akin to the Peanuts movie.
Totally.
Of like, that is quietly doing something
They're doing
revolutionary.
a lot in that movie.
And they're doing a lot in it, but it just works so well and so subtly that people didn't even really think about
Exactly.
it. Right?
So, yeah, I think it is part of that movement, but isn't necessarily like the watershed moment.
Right. And also, this did come out a year after Spider-Verse. But the Peanuts movie was like 2015, 2016?
2016. Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about the Peanuts movie.
I've got a lot to say about the Peanuts movie, man. But yeah, so I think like there's an argument to be made, but not unlike where we landed with Puss in Boots. I think this big cultural touch point is always going to belong to Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think probably Kane on this one.
I think Citizen Kane beats this movie at historical and technical relevance.
Sure.
Yeah. Emotionally, how does this movie make you feel?
Well,
Does it
I
connect with
cry at like 4 separate times in this movie.
Okay.
Like it
Interesting.
just gets me. I don't know what it is. There's just like moments in this movie that reduce me to just a puddle.
Okay. Which 4, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. The first one is when they deliver the first toy and Klaus watches the boy playing with like the little wind-up frog, and just like that push in across, like, you know, they're following the kid as he's running through the house, and it just goes to Klaus and he takes off his hood, and just like this look of wonder he has just makes me bawl.
Yeah.
I get, it's kind of hit or miss, but I usually get pretty teary when Klaus shows up to help with the sled, and just that quiet moment of like, we're not talking, work on the thing. And just like that silent, I'm here, we're okay, but we're not ready to talk about this yet. And that just feels so real to me. And I really love that. And then the moment where Klaus goes with his wife and disappears, and then the very ending of once a year I got to see my friend.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like those 4 consistently, it just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Gets me.
Margu with the sled gets me.
Yeah. Like that whole sequence.
Nothing else really does. Like I feel emotional about it, but, and I don't love like the pop song over it.
Sure.
But it still works for me.
Yeah.
And it kind of works in the same way that like I hate the Polar Express, but Believe by Josh Groban. Even though I think it's like pretty corny.
It's a banger.
But it's
though,
a banger.
man.
And it has that same
feels.
Christmas magic of like, fundamentally this is like so like saccharine and like, but also whatever.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's really good.
And so Margu with the sled really, really gets me.
Yeah.
Because also just what a cute character.
She's adorable. I
She's
love
wonderful.
Margot.
Yeah.
So I think I get the point to Klaus here.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I'm willing to do that.
Okay.
Taking a step back, I don't think this is better than Citizen Kane.
Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm on the fence about it. Like you can continue your argument. You could sway
I don't
me.
know if I have an argument.
It's just
It's
that.
just the vibe. My argument is the criteria, which tells me that Klaus should be, but I also... Well,
I think there's a lot of really great visual filmmaking going on here. There's a lot of really great visual storytelling.
yeah.
I think it is taking a lot of the lessons learned by Citizen Kane and applying it to the versatility and sky is the limit nature of animation, where it's like, we can put the camera anywhere.
Yeah.
We can do anything we want with it. And they use it in really great ways. And I love too that, like, one thing that stood out to me this time around is, like, animation has the ability, especially CG animation, has the ability to be picture perfect in a way that feels almost inhuman. There's kind of this sheen that, like, there's no life to it sometimes.
Yeah.
This movie goes out of its way to introduce imperfections that would show up if you were shooting this in live action. Specifically, what comes to mind is there is a shot where they're delivering to like 6 different houses down the lane, and it's like a wide shot. And it's one of those static cameras where the camera stays still, and then you jump cut to each time that he's going into a new house. And every time it cuts, the camera shifts ever so slightly. It's not a lot, but it looks like they set up for a different setup and tried to get it as close as they could, and it was just a little bit off. And they could have just kept that digital camera exactly where it was and moved the models around. And I love that they don't. I love that they put that ever so slight imperfection in there to help make it feel real, make it feel rounded in a way that works and is very engaging visually. So I would say that I think there is an argument to be made where I think you could say, hey, this is taking a lot of the lessons learned from Citizen Kane about camera placement and movement and all of these things and blocking and marrying it with the medium of animation.
Okay.
I'm also falling back on the fact that we said Puss in Boots is better than Citizen Kane. And if Puss in Boots is better than Citizen Kane, I think Klaus is better than Citizen Kane.
I don't know if Klaus is as good as Puss in Boots for me.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
But see, this is where I think we need to get into the next little segment of this episode.
Okay.
Because this is our last episode of the year.
It is.
And I think we have talked about 25 movies over 24 episodes. And Parker, one of the things that you were really excited about when we were starting this podcast is you're like, I can't wait to look at where all these movies fall once we're pretty far in.
Yeah.
And if it's okay, I'd like to show you the letterboxd list I've been keeping all year.
Ooh.
Where I have been placing the movies generally where I think they fall in our collective opinion. And I think we'll determine what our top 5 are.
Okay.
And in what order they go. Because a huge thing about Citizen Kane is that people always put it like number 1 greatest American film of all time. Great, one of the greatest films of all time. And I just think it would be nice to figure out what the BTCK top 10 films are.
Okay, I'm down. Let's do it.
But when I look at this list, Ratatouille is not as good as Citizen Kane, in our opinion.
No.
And for me, I think I like Ratatouille more than Klaus.
All right.
Maybe.
Okay, all right.
Or maybe Klaus is just slightly above Ratatouille, but I feel... I just don't know.
Ooh, it's going to get contentious.
I know. Well, this is the first episode where we've had a split in the decision. What a dramatic end to the year.
Oh my God.
no one had any idea this was going to happen. But let's
take a look at the list and maybe we'll find where it lay.
So Citizen Kane is currently at number 15.
Okay.
Out of 25.
Okay.
There are 10 movies which we have determined are worse. There are 9 movies which we have determined are worse than Citizen Kane.
Rapid fire me those. Because I haven't seen this list.
Forrest Gump at the bottom. I feel like we agree that Forrest Gump's the worst one we've watched this year. Love Actually above that. Hurt Locker.
Yeah.
Titanic.
Okay.
Those 2 I go back and forth on where they go.
I think that's right. That feels right to
House
me.
on Haunted Hill above Titanic.
Okay.
Paranorman.
Oh, okay.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Fast Times. Ratatouille.
Yeah, I buy that.
Those are the 9 that we have put below Citizen Kane.
I buy that.
And then we have Citizen Kane.
Yep.
And then up from Citizen Kane starting at number 14, Puss in Boots,
Okay.
Lilo and Stitch,
Okay. Thinking about it. Hold on.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Barbie,
Mm-hmm.
The Muppet Movie,
Mm-hmm.
Vertigo,
Yeah.
Akira,
Yep.
Alien,
Okay.
City Lights,
Uh-huh.
Metropolis, Everything Everywhere,
Yeah.
When Harry Met Sally,
Sure.
The Night of the Hunter,
Okay.
Jaws,
Oh.
Casablanca.
Okay.
So our top 5 currently, and I want to move these around.
Yeah.
I want your opinion on this.
Okay. Okay.
Casablanca, number 1, Jaws, number 2, Night of the Hunter, number 3, When Harry Met Sally, number 4, and Everything Everywhere, number 5.
Ooh. I mean, that sounds about right to me.
Right?
Let me look at that.
Yeah,
I have
take a
to
look at
visually
this.
see
Yeah.
these. Okay.
Here, I'll even go into
Yeah, no, this is great.
list
This is great.
form.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This is really exciting for everyone listening.
Yeah, it is.
And watching. You guys can't see
Thrilling.
my phone, but we're looking at the list. I'll make this public now. So if you want
Okay.
to go,
Yeah. I
check
think
it out.
I can get behind those top 5. Those
Okay.
feel right to me.
Great.
This is where it starts feeling a little bit interesting to me.
And I want your opinion. Because I put Barbie pretty low, even though we were like, this is the greatest film.
Sure. But no, I think where it is.
But I think the Muppet Movie, Vertigo, Akira, Alien, City Lights, Metropolis.
Yeah.
The way we talked about those, I feel like, because Barbie may move up, but also these all have years of history,
Totally.
at which point we've seen their influence.
Yeah. City Lights above Alien feels interesting to me. I could maybe swap those.
Okay. I'm down for
know?
that. Yeah.
They're close.
Yeah. City Lights above Akira.
Below.
All right. I'm good with that.
I think that's where it stops.
Okay.
I think I like City Lights is better than Vertigo.
And Akira is better than City Lights.
Yeah.
Alien's better than Akira.
Yeah.
Metropolis is better than Alien. And then we've already established our top 5.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now, where would you put Klaus? I am comfortable seceding my decision that it's worse than Citizen Kane so that we can canonically put it above Citizen Kane for you.
See, I would switch this. I would put Puss in Boots above Lilo and Stitch.
Okay.
And I would put Klaus below Lilo and Stitch. I would put Klaus right above Kane.
I'm good with that.
And I think that's where I would kind of sit with it.
I'm okay with that. I think that's good. Well, I was trying to make an edit to the list and the bar went up, but here we go. Okay. You said interesting about Paranorman.
I was just surprised you put it so low.
Well, it's not better than Aud Brother or Art Thou.
It's
is it?
not. It's just like it's one of it's what we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Of like, I would say that the only bad movie on this list is Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
I think Forrest Gump is pretty terrible.
Yeah. But the rest are.
The rest are like, they range from like
least-
watchable to really great. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing is like, I was just, when you line them all up, I'm like, Paranorman at 20.
Right.
But
But
then I
let's-
look at everything above and I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you think of it as this isn't like, it's not like Paranorman is right above House on Haunted Hill. There are like 30 slots between that probably that we
Totally.
just haven't filled yet.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So,
And that's
as
kind of, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So the official canon decision of the podcast is that Klaus is
I
better.
love that we have a canon.
Yeah. Is better than Citizen Kane.
I think so.
And I don't, but I'm okay putting it above
That's
Citizen
why
Kane.
I only put it one above.
Right.
Because then we can swap it later if we
Okay,
need to.
I feel good about that. And
I'm
we're
not
fine.
saying it's 10 spots
Our
above
friendship
it.
isn't going to suffer. I'm not going to go try and make a sled by myself, and you're going to have to come in later and say, don't talk to me. We're just going to make the sled.
I was this close. When I tell you, I was this close for your Christmas present. I was going to find a sled and paint the name Rosebud on it for your Christmas present. But do you know how hard it is to find like a classic looking like
Yeah.
wood with like the ski sled?
I think my parents have one.
Great.
If they still have it. They might not. We might have gotten rid of it. It was a mini toboggan.
They
It was
burned
real
it in
cute.
a furnace.
They burned it. Oh my God, that's Rosebud.
No.
I was trying to figure out a way to do a Rosebud joke in the intro.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no.
No.
because I had to bring up the problem that we
We
didn't.
really
do 6,000
missed it. We
episodes.
really missed a trick on the Titanic episode, didn't we? It was right there. We could have done something with that,
Yeah.
but here we are.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
Happy 2023, everybody.
Happy 2023.
It's been a
everyone.
full year of the podcast.
We've done this for a full year now.
Almost. But yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Great. We talked about this a little bit last week off mic, but I just want to know, Parker, what's your favorite memory relating to the podcast this year?
I really had a good time on all of our guest star episodes.
Yeah.
Like all of them were always super fun to bring people in. I especially really loved doing the Jaws episode because we all dressed up.
Yeah.
And that was just fun
was
and
really
silly.
fun. Yeah.
And it's always a good time to get you, me, and Will together and just have a chat. Barbie episode was super fun for the same reasons, even though you were squished to one side of the couch and wouldn't take up space to tell people you were
It's
squished.
really funny. It's so funny.
It's really funny to look back
Top
on.
10 moments of the year. Me sitting for 3 hours squished against a couch arm, not saying anything.
Not saying a word. Oh man.
It's really good.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think I've really liked the guest star episodes quite a bit. What about you?
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed watching Forrest Gump together and just
Yeah.
being like, what? And same with Titanic. Watching Titanic together was really fun.
Yeah.
Kind of those watching them in the context of, is this better than Citizen Kane?
Definitely.
Kind of makes it a more interesting movie night than other movie nights in some ways. Really liked talking about Fast Times. Was just so surprised by that movie.
Yeah.
And have thought about it so much since then.
I've really enjoyed, not to interrupt you, but just to add to that, like the movies that both of us hadn't seen, that were new to both of us, were really fun experiences. Akira
was an experience. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a really nice time. And thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for joining us for a year. You know,
Yeah.
that's not an invaluable amount of time.
No, and we've talked about it that like primarily we just do this for ourselves because it's a fun thing to do, but it also is really exciting when we see that people are listening or watching.
Yeah,
and
or
we're like, oh, hey,
commenting on YouTube.
People want to check this out. That's
Talking
really
to us
fun.
in our lives if you know us or if you run into us, I guess. Yeah, it's just been a really nice first year of the podcast, and we've got a lot of really exciting stuff.
Got some
lined
fun
up.
stuff for next year.
I do want to say that our next episode, we will be taking another look at Citizen Kane. This year, when we started the podcast, we didn't really fully think about it. We just kind of threw Citizen Kane in with Vertigo.
Yeah.
So we will be starting next year with Citizen Kane. But then the episode after that is Jean Dielmont, right?
Which is where this all started, was the new list.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was a new Sight and Sound list from the BFI, which put that movie at number 1.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. So look forward to those next two. We kind of told you the next two. I just thought it'd be more exciting to tell them what we're looking at after Citizen Kane. But yeah, to kind of bring 2023 to a close, let's just reiterate what our top 10 movies of all time are right now.
Okay, great.
Number 10, Vertigo. Number 9, City Lights. Number 8, Akira. Number 7, Alien. Number 6, Metropolis. Number 5, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Number 4, When Harry Met Sally. Number 3, The Night of the Hunter. Number 2, Jaws. And number 1, Casablanca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good lineup.
Also really fun to watch Metropolis. I
Yeah.
loved watching
I'm
Metropolis.
so glad you liked that.
It's good.
It's a good movie.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas,
Happy
everyone.
New Year, everyone.
Happy
we'll
New Year.
See you in 2024.
Catch you next time.